Hey guys, welcome to the Zapata Brand Podcast, Boxing Edition, brought to you by Ringside. Go to ringside.com/podcast, and you too can get upwards of 40% off selected brands. Well, guys, like I said, it is fight week. This Saturday, September 14th, at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, Canelo Alvarez defends his unified 168-pound titles against Edgar, the Chosen One, Berlanga. And who better to have on than my man, Jim Lampley, 2015 International Boxing Hall of Famer. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing well, George. How are you?
I'm doing good. Doing good now that I got you. Speaking of which, Jim, ppv.com, 16 days removed when the fight happens this Saturday, that'll be your 1-year anniversary. How's that transition been for you so far?
Well, I've said before, and this is a good time to repeat this. When I was teaching a course that I created here at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in electronic media and storytelling therein, one of the points that I made to my students over and over and over was that the constant evolution of electronics and management perspectives relative to electronic communication, television, radio, the computer, digital entities, et cetera, ultimately that leads to a constant reinvention of the ways that stories are told to the public. And so I spent quite a long time, 31 years, sitting at ringside calling fights as a blow-by-blow commentator. And then that went away because of the demise of HBO boxing at the hands of its new owners, AT&T. And for a while, I was without any particular voice in the boxing world, other than when people like you would reach out to ask for my opinion, for which I was very grateful. And then along came ppv.com as the perfect illustration of everything I had been teaching my students. Here's a new form of communication. Lance Pugmire, Chris Algieri, Dan Canovio, and I all sit near ringside on fight night, and we trade chat comments with each other about what we're seeing in the ring. It's a chat live stream, and viewers of the pay-per-view who elect to do so can join us and shoot back at us with their own comments and observations. So it's participatory. It's a constant, steady stream of commentary. It's a different kind of commentary stream than I delivered when I was doing blow-by-blow, because obviously there is a blow-by-blow commentator on the telecast who has the position in which to do that. And back in the day, as HBO was continuing to evolve, I used to say to people that I could imagine a moment when I would walk around behind Roy and go sit in Max's chair, and Max would trade places with me. He would become the blow-by-blow guy. I would become the sort of eminence grise, the gray eminence who would make overarching editorial comments on the fight. Now that's happened because the kinds of comments I make on ppv.com are more in the vein of what Lara used to say or what Max used to say than they are blow by blow. So it happened.
Well, now that were you kind of foreseeing the future in the way that social media is now? Now you could literally, it's like everyone has your text phone number in their pocket and could communicate with you on whether it be social media, but on this platform, which I find very easy to use, very reliable, and no subscription. It makes it easier for them to communicate with someone like you, who, by the way, the voice of millions, if not tens of millions of people, including myself, the voice of their childhood, and had given them the opportunity to contact with you. Did you ever think there'd be a place where that would happen?
Well, I didn't really foresee it, although I will say, if you check carefully, you'll notice I have no social media presence, and I've never had any social media presence. The closest I come to social media presence is ppv.com. The reason I don't have any particular social media presence is that I think the chance for anyone and everyone, with or without expertise, with or without academically gained knowledge, et cetera, to participate in the public stream of opinion with regard particularly to politics and government is potentially dangerous. And I think it's led to some damaging things in our society. So I don't do Facebook. I don't do Instagram. I don't do any of the social media, which are so popular with the general public. And that was a divide between my students and me when I was teaching my course.
So did you ever think of maybe crossing over a little bit into that when you're teaching your course? Because obviously that generation, I mean, I have two kids that are glued to social media to an extent, and I get it because my mother doesn't know or doesn't do social media, but that's a big part of the communication now.
I love your mother. I do understand that my children and my grandchildren, children are all adults now. My grandchildren will ultimately be social media participants. You know, I can't take water out of the ocean. I can't stop the general evolution of electronics and society toward new platforms. I just discovered when I was teaching my course that my background was as a consumer of professional mass media.
Mm-hmm.
And for my students to be delivering opinions to me that were clearly formulated by social media, people not trained in information gathering, people not trained in information evaluation, people with no particular pledge regarding their responsibility to the society, that bothered me. And eventually it led to leaving teaching behind and coming to work for ppv.com.
Do you miss that kind of journalism?
Do I what?
Do you miss that kind of journalism now, where you actually get fact collecting and doing your background checks and stuff like that? Do you miss that?
Well, I think anybody in my age group who grew up as an ardent consumer of responsible journalism and who regarded that kind of media function as an important part of my development and my lifestyle, yeah, I think anybody who thinks carefully about it would miss the expectation that what you're looking at is at least a qualified version of truth delivered by people who've been trained to look for truth and who've been trained in a lot of instances to restrain their own impulses in favor of objectivity. That was, to me, better than what we've got. But again, I can't take water out of the ocean. So what we've got is increasingly where we're going. And I have to deal with that in the best way that I can.
Well, as things change, don't forget ppv.com. Jim Lampley, Dan Canobio, Chris Algieri, and Lance Pugmire will be in the live viewer chat. And let me get that out there first, because I use it a lot when I'm going to watch the big fights. It's a reliable, easy platform to use. And I am not a tech guy, but it's easy. I'm always in the chat talking to you guys, and it's always fun. So let's deviate a little bit to the fight this Saturday night. It's another rivalry of Mexico versus Puerto Rico, but not exactly one that I think is going to be one that is going to be as big as it could be. Canelo Alvarez, 168-pound unified champion, defending against probably in the last few fights his biggest opponent, Edgar, the chosen one, Berlanga. I think he was set up a little bit of failure here from the get-go, reeling off 17 straight knockouts. What do you think about this choice for Canelo Alvarez? Because he's getting a little bit of blowback now.
It feels perfunctory, and I think that's why he's getting blowback. Berlanga's 16 straight first-round knockouts at the beginning of his career were judged by most of the high-quality boxing analysts I know and follow to have been a matchmaking triumph, and more of a matchmaking triumph than a reflection of some overwhelming cosmic talent on his part. I felt good for him when the 16 first-round knockout streak ultimately came to an end, because now he does not have to face the, potential criticism and ridiculous pressure that comes from anyone expecting that he's going to go in and get a first-round knockout every time. Obviously, he has punching power. We'd be crazy to suggest that he could get 16 first-round knockouts against professional fighters without having punching power. He does have that. But if there's one asset or quality which does not guarantee success against Canelo Alvarez, it's punching power. because if there's one thing that Canelo has proven, I think, at his level of the sport, it is that his chin, his punch resistance, is about as good as anybody we've seen. And he proved it once again against Jaime Munguia, who's a quality fighter with a big punch, who landed several clean shots on Canelo Alvarez and couldn't waver him, couldn't shake him. So Canelo has extraordinary punch resistance. He's shown that throughout his career, and therefore I think it's easily explained why he would take the perceived risk, if there's any perceived risk in it, and I don't think there is, in facing a lesser boxer, a lesser skill package in Berlanga.
Now, that being said, do you feel this is a showcase fight for Canelo Alvarez because of the blowback he's getting? They want to put him back into a position where he could be regarded as someone who is the greatest Mexican fighter of all time, because having it always on this weekend, and as a matter of fact, going up against UFC Noche is a tall task itself. But do you think this is a showcase fight for Canelo for the prospects of a next fight against David Benavidez?
Yeah, when you've got a career like Canelo has, and you've accomplished what he's accomplished, every fight is a showcase fight. Every fight is another step toward trying to underline and substantiate those people who believe that he's, quote, the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. If there's any country in the world outside of maybe the United States where it's truly meaningful to be seen as the greatest from your nation of all time, it's Mexico. And, you're comparing him with a lot of genuinely extraordinary fighters, including people I covered, like Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales and a variety of others. So I think every one of Canelo's fights is a showcase fight. This is not the fight that the upper level of boxing intelligentsia wanted to see. They want to see him fight David Benavidez. They want to see him fight others in the range of David Benavidez, not Edgar Berlanga. So it's a placeholder. It's a stay busy. It's, as I said at the beginning, seemingly perfunctory. But you can't rule out the possibility that something ultra shocking takes place anytime that a fighter has the kinds of credentials that Berlanga has as a power puncher.
Now, the reason why I brought that up is a showcase fight. I meant more or less the one knock against Berlanga, and I don't know if you've seen the leaked sparring footage that he had. He was dropped, and then his chin isn't the greatest. It's a little shaky, meaning putting on a spectacular knockout to kind of cement, hey, I am who I say I am. That's what I was referring to, putting him in with
Berlanga. I think, again, the bar's too low for Canelo to enhance his credentials overwhelmingly and enormously here, because a spectacular knockout is pretty much what I think a lot of his following expects. So he could knock Berlanga out, hurt him, damage him, maybe get a knockdown once and then hurt him again, get a TKO. That might not satisfy the Canelo audience that's looking for something that fits onto a Mike Tyson type highlight reel. And again, Tyson had quite a number of consecutive knockouts at the beginning of his career. Eventually, events and circumstances demonstrated that was matchmaking. That was brilliant matchmaking by Jimmy Jacobs, one of the greatest matchmakers of all time.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've covered Canelo, obviously, I would assume, on Cinco de Mayo and on Independence Weekend. I would imagine through your career, you've covered him at that time. What is the atmosphere surrounding Las Vegas? Now, it's going to be a different atmosphere. I think you have two huge events that night, but what's the atmosphere surrounding Canelo's presence in Las Vegas? What does that feel like?
Well, Canelo's must-see TV in the boxing world. And at this moment in time, when I think of my movie star friends or other Hollywood types or people from other sports who are likely to come to Las Vegas for the fight, they're more likely to come to a Canelo fight than to any other. They don't know enough yet about others who could conceivably rise to that level of stardom. So, my friends who, some of them who directed the movies in which I appeared, or Hollywood writers and actors whom I've met through those experiences. Some of them are going to be in Las Vegas just because it's Canelo Alvarez. And I can't I can't tell you for what other fighter at this moment they would be showing up, other than maybe for the most sophisticated among them, David Benavidez, because punchers are where the glamour is, and Benavidez is an extraordinarily big puncher, or so it appears so far.
Mm-hmm. So let's say Canelo does what is expected. He does put on the showcase fight that he needs to do. In my opinion, he does need to show out on Saturday night. Where does that put him next? Obviously, Benavidez is one that everybody wants to see. And I know it's like beating a dead horse that he wants to go out there. I do believe that fight is going to happen. For some reason, I just feel it will happen.
The longer it takes before it happens, the more it eats away at the perimeter of Canelo's image. Okay, there's a fragmentation that takes place around the edges of that big star for as long as it takes for him to say, yes, I know what the public wants, and I'm going to give it to them. It's not as if he's going to be underpaid for the Benavidez fight. That isn't the case. So there comes a moment, and I don't know that we're there yet, but eventually there comes a moment when even Canelo's most ardent fans start to say, hey, wait a minute. This guy's knocking on the door, and he has the record that seems to show that he deserves the shot. When are you going to say yes? And what is your reasoning for not doing so? Canelo can say, well, and he does say in some instances, he's 175 and I'm 168. To the general public, that doesn't hold a lot of water. It's only 7 pounds. And a lot of people in the general public are not sophisticated enough about the sport to recognize the difference that 7 pounds can make. Canelo's sophisticated enough. He knows that may still be the reason why he hasn't taken the David Benavidez fight. He may want Benavidez to come back down to 168, or he may want to have time himself to groom himself up to 175 before he takes that fight.
Now, you were deeply covered Julio Cesar Chavez in his career. He was loved by all Mexicans, okay? Canelo is a lightning rod sometimes. I mean, he's almost comes off a little smug. And our good friend Kevin Ioli always defended Canelo, said he fought who we had to fight. It wasn't until recently where this fight was announced where he started saying, okay, now, and like you said, it's starting to come a little bit from the outside come in, where you want to solidify yourself as this all-time great, but you still got to fight the one that's out there that everybody wants you to fight. Does his smugness affect his ultimate legacy?
There are a lot of things that affect his ultimate legacy. And when you make the comparison to Julio Cesar Chavez, and you probably know this even better than I do, you've got to take into account that Canelo's from Guadalajara and Chavez was from Sinaloa. Mm-hmm. So there's still a significant portion of the Mexican population who would look at you with a straight face and say, well, Canelo's not a real Mexican and Chavez is. And, I've had that argument in restaurants and bars. They're both in Mexico. Yeah, but, he's down in Cancun. He's riding horseback. He's not exactly the same kind of dirt and grit and guts as Julio Cesar Chavez. I get it, and I covered a lot of the heart of Chavez's career. But sooner or later, you stay too long at the fair, you run into the opponent who's got the right magic. And I'll never say in my heart of hearts that Chavez got a deserved victory against Meldrick Taylor. He got a gift from a referee who found an opportunity to stop the fight in his favor and did so. That was on paper, and in my eyes, a Meldrick Taylor win. And a lot of Mexican fans who love Chavez can't possibly accept that. It's too sacrilegious for them.
Let me ask you a question. I've always wanted to ask you. Okay, I loved Oscar De La Hoya, and I loved Julio Cesar Chavez in their primes. And there's been a debate, and now De La Hoya goes right back at Canelo at any chance he can. In their primes, I wouldn't say from 47 was Canelo's prime, but let's say at 54, right around there. Does De La Hoya beat Canelo, and does Chavez at 47 beat Canelo?
Does Chavez at 47 beat Canelo? Does Chavez at 47 in his extreme prime, right in the middle of the career, the guy that I was covering in 88 and 89, beat Canelo? Decent chance to do it. But again, Canelo's punch resistance, his ability to take a shot. I'm not sure that Chavez ever fought anybody who was that strong in standing in and taking a shot as Canelo is. It would have been a fun fight to watch. And I don't know that I would want to say to you, yes, this guy wins. I'm not sure. I really am not. De La Hoya, I think that the early De La Hoya in the middle of his career, before he had fought Chavez twice, I wouldn't have picked him to beat Canelo. After the two experiences against Chavez, let's say 4 months after he beats Chavez the second time, he fights a 147-pound Canelo Alvarez. Oscar to have a chance to win that fight. Quicker and more multi-talented. But again, I'm not really sure because he might not have been able to hurt Canelo. And in a Mexican-style fight, sometimes you got to be able to hurt the other guy to beat him. And
I'm talking about like the I Corte era where he was, De La Hoya was, but I thought he didn't get enough credit as to how good he was at the time, as far as his hand speed, his foot lateral movement, his ring generalship. I don't think he got enough credit.
I don't think he ever got enough credit for how good
really
he was. I think that the odds were stacked against Oscar ever getting complete credit for how good he was, because a huge percentage of its audience was women who loved him because he was beautiful. And that alone diminishes your estimation as a fighter in the eyes of many members of that audience.
Yeah, that really doesn't fly in the Mexican culture.
I make an argument, George, and I've made this argument in other media on other platforms, that Oscar De La Hoya individually sold more tickets to women than any other American athlete ever. And I base it on one piece of evidence, which was his fight in El Paso against Patrick Charpentier, a totally perfunctory title defense. Everybody knew who was going to win, drew a crowd of 47 or 48,000. And at the news conference the day before the fight, the audience was overwhelmingly women. And in the football stadium on the night of the fight, the audience was overwhelmingly women. I never saw that kind of response to any American athlete other than Oscar.
Skill for skill, though. And I get into this argument because I'm a huge De La Hoya fan growing up through the amateurs. Skill for skill, though, I think he would give Canelo fits. I think he really would. I think even though his punch resistance, you say, I think De La Hoya had good punch resistance too. He would get back up until he started moving up into the 60-pound range.
He was faster than Canelo. I don't think he had the kind of chin that Canelo had. Those are the two areas where I'm willing to say something categorical about that. Are they both skilled boxers? Very much so. Would have been a great fight.
That would have been one that I would love to see. And
you would have paid to see it, whether you were a woman or not.
Yeah. Yes. Good point. Good point, Jim. Good point. Well, let's take one more look at another fight on that show. Two guys that are towards the end of their career. Danny Garcia, just because he's a Philadelphia guy here, PA, and Arizona Lara. What is this Danny Garcia's last shot here? And boy, Lara's really turns it around with his power, something he never had. And is this his last shot here, Danny Garcia? And it could be, if he wins, this could be instant first ballot Hall of Fame career.
George, before I started doing my paper research, my academic research for the weekend, I didn't even know they were still fighting. Okay, so you could have fooled me on the subject of whether both Danny Garcia and Erislandy Lara were still active in their careers at this moment, because generally speaking, for PPV.com, I'm preparing for the main event. And then, and then I look at the undercard and get ready to sort of, I'm not saying I'm warming up on the undercard, but I'm not under as intense an expectation from the people I'm working for to provide quality observations on the undercard fights. I should, but I don't pay as much attention to that. When I turned around and paid attention to this and said, what? Danny Garcia versus Erislandy Lara? Is this some kind of Veterans League fight? That are they both involved in a comeback at this point? I have to assume this is for money, or for the inner hunger of continuing to prove that you do what you do. Prize fighters are different. They get a particular internal feedback from what they do in the ring that's different even from other athletes, because they're proving their courage every time they go in there. If I'm a baseball player and I go out to play right field for the Red Sox at age 42, I'm not proving my courage. I'm proving that maybe I can still swing the bat, and management likes the tickets that I'll sell, but I'm not proving my courage. Fighters who stay at the fair, as long as Garcia and Lara have stayed at the fair, they're proving their courage, and they get the inner feedback and the kick inside from knowing that that's part of what they're doing. They're also flirting with the possibility that they show up in the ring and have nothing, because there are many instances I've seen in which you can train well. Your trainer says you're great. The sparring partners say you're still terrific, and you show up in the ring and have nothing. So I don't know whether it's possible that Danny Garcia or Erislandy Lara is going to show up in the ring and have nothing. We'll see on the night of the fight. Sometimes in an instance like that, I look back and say, who had the better amateur career? In that instance, I'm thinking that Lara had the richer amateur career. Maybe he's got a little more left. We'll find out.
Well, let me piggyback on that just a little bit. You said that sometimes your training camp goes great, you feel great, and then you step up those steps. And I remember you even said that on a broadcast. I think it was
zero.
And nothing happens.
Yes.
Okay. So two-part question. One, who would be the one that you've seen that happened to, whether you saw him in a fighter meeting, you said, this guy looks great, and he had nothing? And two, is there any possible outside shot this happens to Canelo Alvarez come Saturday night?
Off the top of my head right now, I can't think of a truly great fighter who showed up in the ring and had nothing at a moment when you wouldn't have predicted he had nothing, when Larry Holmes had nothing against later opponents, when Muhammad Ali had nothing against Larry Holmes. You kind of knew that going in. In this instance, I'm not really sure which one of them might have nothing. But
did you cover Terry Norris, Ray Leonard?
No,
Okay,
I did not cover Terry Norris, Ray Leonard. In fact, there's a footnote there. Ray Leonard was at that moment the expert commentator on my HBO telecast, and he lost that gig because he fought Terry Norris on Showtime.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, and I was aware that most likely Ray was going to lose the fight, but I was not aware that it would be a wipeout and that Norris would, fundamentally destroy him from round to round the way that he did. I didn't see that one coming.
Because I remember him saying,
I was still in my learning process then. That was within the first year or so that I was calling fights on HBO. And in 31 years of calling fights for HBO, I learned a little bit more every year. It's not a sport about which you can ever say, I know it all. The first person who steps up and says, I know everything there is to know about boxing, is lying to himself.
Well, it's funny you say that, because
like a fighter.
Yeah, one of the great trainers that is brother Nazim Richardson out of Philadelphia. I remember him telling me, if you ever have a trainer that says, I know everything, get a new trainer. He told me
100%. And he's one of the trainers I most respected, Nazim Richardson. Really good trainer, really bright guy. That kind of humility is really valuable in a corner.
Right. So the second part of that question, is there any shot Canelo takes those steps up to the ring on Saturday night and has zero in your eyes?
Absolutely. Always possible. Yes. At this stage of his career, you can't rule out the possibility that he steps up into the ring and has nothing. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. How many palatial ranches in Cancun can you buy? How many beautiful women can you hang out with? And of course, he's married now. How many spectacular thoroughbred horses can you purchase and train and ride? And that's his real passion outside the ring, is horseback riding. So at some point, you're bound to reach the moment when your inner self, not the part of yourself that you speak to every day, but the part of yourself that lurks inside you and waits for you to really sincerely ask. At some point, you're bound to reach the moment when your inner self says, you know what? Doesn't matter that much anymore. You've already proven plenty. And now we're in round 8 and things aren't going very well for you. Go ahead, sit down.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because as I'm getting, I've owned my own business since I was 19. I'm 48 now. I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning every day. It's religious every single day. I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, I don't know how much longer I want to do it. It's funny you said, because it just happened recently in the last 6-7 months. I didn't know if this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And
George, I'm 75. How eager do you think I am? All right. I mean, I'm 75, and next Tuesday, I'm supposed to get on a plane and fly to Las Vegas again. Well, I love the ppv.com people. I love the fight game. I love boxing. I love having covered Canelo. But is my hunger to do it the same as it used to be? Not exactly.
Yeah, and let's get lastly on that. We could wrap. I could jump right on that too. You've covered 14 Olympics between summer and winter. You've covered a lot of big fights. You've done college football, if I'm not mistaken. You've done some of the greatest fights, some of the greatest events just all around the globe.
I hosted 3 Super Bowls, including one of the most anticipated of all time, the day that Danny Marino and the Dolphins played Joe Montana and the 49ers in Palo Alto.
Oh, my God.
I hosted both of the Cowboys wins back-to-back in 91 and 92. Actually, 92 and 93, because it's in January, et cetera. I had a lot of amazing experiences. Yes, 14 Olympics, world championships in various events. Yeah, on and on and on. And the only sport, frankly, that would have kept me coming back the way I am now is boxing. I wouldn't be doing this for any other sport. I do this for boxing.
And that's what I mean. So you have all this stuff, 2015 Hall of Fame. You won numerous awards. Okay, at the end of this, when you wrap this all up, what does Jim Lampley want to be remembered as?
A guy who did the work. A guy who respected the events and the athletes enough to continue to do the homework and educate himself from moment to moment to moment, and fight to fight to fight, and event to event to event, from on camera to on camera, from voiceover to voiceover. A guy who did the work. I would like to be known as a guy who was for 50 years, because I'm now in my 50th year of doing this kind of work, a worker bee.
Well, I could tell you, Jim, being the voice of my childhood and millions of others, it's honor again to have you on the show. This Saturday night, September 14th, ppv.com. You are in the viewer chat with Dan Canobio, Chris Algieri, and Lance Pugmire. Once again, Jim, as always, it is a pleasure to have you.
Really privileged, George. I admire you for your perspective. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching the Zapata Brand podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and listen where all podcasts are available.